Good afternoon, everyone. So today we'll be discussing the Geography Optional Paper 2, Mains 2021. Did you see the question paper of Mains this year? See, if you look at the question paper 2 of Geography Mains, there were certain questions which were very easy. Some of the questions were on expected lines, and some of the questions were there which required on-spot improvisation, where no book would provide you or no discussion can provide you that. Okay. Achha, the departure was that we had no question from agriculture. As expected, there was a question on solar energy. There was a question on coal. This was along the expected lines. There was also a question which was along expected lines, that was the groundwater resources, because National Water Policy draft had come this year. So we had discussed about the groundwater. And one more question was there which was predictable, that was the question related to border disputes. Okay. Other than this, you can very easily solve question 1, B, C and D part. We had landslides this year, so we had 2 questions in general studies for landslides and 1 question in the optional as well for the landslides. Then another very easy question that everybody who is writing mains will attempt, that is the interlinking of rivers. Okay. And the question was very easy, just the ecological and economic challenges, and this question has been repeated n number of times, I guess. Chalo, we'll start with the questions. Question 1B, discuss the geopolitical impact of bilateral relationship between India and Bhutan. What is the keywords here? Geopolitical impact. Now, what is geopolitics, you people know? The politics, the economy which is affected by the geography of a region. Geography means the size of the area. It means the location of the area, the resources that are present in the area. So these are the different aspects of geographical location: the size, location, or resources. Okay. Now, how will you introduce the question? See, it is a 10-marker question. You will write one side for this, plus a map has to be drawn here. So how will you introduce the question? You have written so many questions till now by giving locational perspective, buffer location of Bhutan, trade relationships. So the introduction that we have should not stretch more than 3 lines or 4 lines, because it is just a 10-mark question. Okay? So you can start the discussion by mentioning that Bhutan is a buffer state, strategic partnership you can mention about, or you can start the discussion by the Treaty of 1949, which was revised in 2007 between India and Bhutan. Okay? So you will start the question by identifying the location of Bhutan, where it is located, and how are we or what governs the relationship between India and Bhutan, or it is a landlocked country. Now, the question is largely on the geopolitical impact. Now, what can be the impact of the bilateral relationship between India and Bhutan on the geography and on the politics of the region? Region means whole of this area. That is, it will include the areas of northeastern India, it will include the areas of China and overall security of India. When you talk about the geopolitical impact, the biggest problem here that we have with Bhutan is that Bhutan is one of the neighbors where China has, or been considering this as the last territory to be conquered. Still, Bhutan does not have an embassy of China. Still, Bhutan's foreign relationships, they are governed by the interest that Bhutan enjoys with India. So it is one of the last territories to be conquered by China and is a buffer state between India and China. Though this was not in the current affairs, this was expected somewhere in 2017 when we had the Doklam issue. So yahan par in this, what you are going to mention about, you are going to mention about security of India. Okay? The security of the region, wherein you can mention terms like Chumbi Valley, Doklam, or Siliguri corridor, or Chicken's Neck. Bhutan also has some kind of boundary disputes with China. There's a boundary of Bhutan with China and there's a boundary dispute. If you must have read about India and Bhutan, China has offered a packaged proposal to Bhutan a number of times. That is, if this is Bhutan, okay, there is a dispute between this area of Bhutan and China. Okay. This is an area which is a grassland. Okay. This is a grassland. What China is offering Bhutan is that you provide us this area, and you take a larger area in this region. What is the advantage to China? Abhi suppose there is a dispute between the two countries. Yahan par there is a disputed territory. There is a disputed territory here as well. The disputed territory here is less in the western part. In the northeastern part, it is more. But what China is saying is that you will, or we are offering you a greater amount of land in this region. You take this land and you offer this small area to us. The region around Doklam, and this is the Chumbi Valley. The purpose is that it brings India, or it brings China very close to the Siliguri corridor. And in case of a conflict, China will always have an upper hand. Okay? So when you talk about geopolitical impact, you will talk about security, wherein you can mention these items like Chumbi Valley, Doklam, or Siliguri corridor. Second, it will have an impact on the politics of northeastern India. Do you remember we discussed about 2003 Operation All Clear? Kahan clear? Kahan discuss kiya tha ye? Operation All Clear 2003. Royal Bhutanese Army. So insurgency in northeast, it is affected by our relationship with Bhutan. Because if we don't have a good relation with Bhutan, then in that case, those insurgent groups, they find a safe haven in these regions like Bhutan. So it is important for the development of the northeast as well. Other than this, it is important for India, the relationship between India and Bhutan, it is important for countering China. Like for example, Bhutan can import the arms from India. It still cannot export. It cannot export arms outside its country. Moreover, when we talk about the Belt and Road Initiative, we also talk about BBIN, if you have heard about. Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal corridor. So we'll talk about this as well. So for overall regional development, the relationship with Bhutan is crucial. Okay? So the question was not on expected lines, but there's certain topics that you're going to discuss here. And keep the discussion very short. Make diagrams here. Make the maps here. Question 1C. Discuss the economic significance of volcanic soils of India. Again, the question appears to be very straight, but you don't have much of matter to write. What will you write in economic significance of volcanic soils? You first must know what is volcanic soil, what all areas are they present. Now, iska economic significance kya? What is the economic significance? Suppose you have identified, yes, he is talking about black soil. Now what? Important for cotton production, sugarcane cultivation. Uske alawa kya likhoge? So this is the kind of question wherein you will not have much. See, it is not asking me geological importance, economic importance. Just economic importance is being asked, Paras. See, yahan par you will have to first explain the black soil. the regions of black soil or volcanic soils in India through a map. Okay? And then when you talk about the economic importance, then you start writing about the crops that are cultivated and why are these cultivated. Let's say I'm saying, simple is, that is important for cotton cultivation. And why is black soil or volcanic soil important for cotton cultivation? Or why is it important for sugarcane cultivation? Very important is, when I talk about cotton, cotton is a crop that requires some good amount of calcium for its cultivation. Okay? Cotton is a crop that requires some calcium for its cultivation, and if I look at the properties of black soil is rich in calcium and magnesium. So some secondary macronutrients which are required for cultivation of cotton, they are present in the black soil. Okay? Then if I look at this area, this is the region wherein black soils have high amount of clay content. Okay? And because they have high amount of clay content, almost 60-62% is clay, that means it has good amount of moisture holding capacity. Now when you write that it has good amount of moisture holding capacity, you will link it with the climate of the region. That cotton is a dry crop, this is a dry region, and the areas which are dry also see greater chances of monsoon failure. So the soil has to have some good amount of moisture holding capacity, which is there in the volcanic soil, and the reason being that it has high amount of clay in it. Then when you talk about economic importance, you can also try to take the discussion towards dryland agriculture, because this is one of the drylands of India. So for overall economic development, the dryland agriculture, it can be practiced or it is practiced in this region. Otherwise, you won't have much of content here. So when you start the question, you will start the question by defining what are volcanic soils, how are these formed, and in a map just show where are these present in the country. Okay. So first you will introduce the topic like this. Okay. You may mention very briefly about the geological history that created the volcanic eruptions, hotspot volcanoes, and it led to the formation of black soil in certain areas of India. Then you talk about the cultivation of crops. Okay. Then you also talk about, when you're talking about cultivation, you tell the examiner that why it is important for cotton, why it is important for sugarcane. Okay. Again, sugarcane is a exhaustive crop. It needs a lot of nutrients to be present in the soil because it is cultivated in the area for one full year. And if you remember, we discussed that yahan par sugarcane is cultivated for 18 months. So it can exhaust the nutrients very fast. And this is a soil which is rich in lime, it is rich in magnesium, it is rich in iron, rich in aluminium. So it has a number of macro and or potash also varies, it is rich in some areas. So it is rich in minerals. So for cultivation of exhaustive crops, this soil has some kind of significance. Take it. So this appears to be a direct question, but you will have to write this question by explaining various aspects of black soil. But do not forget, the question is only on economic importance. So as you're explaining an aspect of black soil, you'll have to link how it is related to the question. I am explaining the properties of black soil. Then I would tell that, okay, because it has high amount of calcium, along with some other secondary macronutrients, it can be used for cultivation of cotton. It can be used for cultivation of water or nutrient exhaustive crops. This is a very straight question. You cannot get an easier question than this. Simple wording, simple requirement of the examiner. Give a reasoned account of difference between sugar industry of North and Peninsular India. Again, the introduction has to be short because you have a lot of matter to write here. Okay. just introduce the sugar industry, one of the important agro-based industries employing these many people and so on. Okay? Then simple, just mention the differences. You can say that sugar industry is located in these many states. These are the major producers of sugar. And industry has been shifting towards peninsular India since the past few decades. ये introduction हो गया. You can introduce sugar industry and identify the locations that it is present in North India as well as South India. Now, simple, come to the difference. What are the differences? In terms of the age of the industry, can I say northern parts of India, these are the traditional sugarcane cultivating regions. So the old sugar industries are present in the northern parts of India, and in the peninsular India, it is a recent entrant. Second, in terms of the crushing season, one difference is the tropical climate in peninsular India, subtropical climate in northern India. As a result, the crushing season in the parts of northern India will start from the months of October, November and will continue till the month of March. While in peninsular India, it starts from the months of October, continues till the month of May. So till May end, it continues. So the peninsular India, it will have a longer crushing season. Third, in terms of size of the mill, which state produces maximum of the sugar? It is UP. If I look at UP and if I compare it with Maharashtra, if I compare the two regions, UP produces more amount of sugar, Maharashtra produces less amount of sugar. UP is the largest, Maharashtra is second largest producer. But if I look at the number of mills in Maharashtra that operated in 2019-20, we had around 187 mills that operated in 2019-20. While in UP, the number was approximately 100 mills. So we have less number of mills in UP, but the mills are of larger size. Like if you look at the mills of Western Uttar Pradesh, we have large number of mills by Bajaj Hindustan. Large size mills are there. Okay? The size of the mill. Fourth, peninsular India mein largely we have the cooperative mills, while in northern parts of India we have the mills which are largely in the private hands. Most of the cooperative mills of UP, they have been shut down or they have been converted into private mills. Then you can mention about the efficiency of production of sugar in peninsular India versus North India. Peninsular India mein more efficient. Because the sugar cane that you get, it has a better recovery rate. The pricing mechanisms. Do you remember we discussed about FRP and SAP? Where do we have SAP? UP, Bihar, Uttarakhand, Punjab, Haryana. Rest of the area, they are governed by FRP, fair and remunerative prices. A simple, easy question was there. And see, these kind of questions, examiner will not read much of the things. He will just see whether important points are there or not, and marks will be awarded. And it is very easy to fetch marks, and not much of thinking is required in these kind of questions. Plus, you must make a map and show important locations of sugar industry in peninsular India as well as in the areas of northern India. North India, you can show locations of Uttar Pradesh, you can show locations of Uttarakhand, or you can show locations of, let's say, Bihar. We have done different districts. And peninsular India, Maharashtra, Karnataka, or Tamil Nadu, three most important areas. Okay. Andhra, maybe we have the sugar industry. Visakhapatnam, Chittoor, Anantapur. Okay.
Question 2A. Landslide is a major problem in Himalayan region. Discuss its causes and mitigation measures. I had discussed this comprehensively when I was taking up contemporary issues with you. We discussed about landslides. I remember it distinctly. I think this question is manageable. I don't think I need to discuss it all over again, right? So that takes care of question 2A. And now question 2B. Appraise why drought is one of the most common climatic extremes in India. Right? Question 2B. Explain why drought is one of the most common climatic extremes in India. Now, bache, this question also is completely doable from the content provided to you in the class. You begin with the introduction that drought is very simplistically defined as a state of water shortages for general human needs, for industry, for livestock, usually because of failure of monsoon, but not always limited to failure of monsoon. That's how we simplistically define drought as. And droughts, bache, in India are of 3 types. We categorize droughts into 3 types. As the meteorological drought, hydrological drought, agricultural drought. And then you mentioned what are the reasons for meteorological drought. When the rainfall deficiency in the monsoonal season is more than 25% of the long period average, it's a meteorological drought. And why is it a most common climatic extreme? Because Indian monsoon is erratic. That's one. Second, Indian monsoon erratic to hai, but I mean in continuation of its being erratic because of temporal and spatial variabilities. That's year-on-year variability, intra-season variability, and spatial variability. And then you can give a quick rainfall map of India, wherein you mention what are the spatial variabilities in the country. Peninsular interior, receiving less than 75 centimeter of rainfall. Western part of the country receiving less than 25, that is Western Rajasthan, less than 25. So semi-arid, arid regions of the country become especially vulnerable to climatic extreme of drought because variability in our country has another dimension. The regions which receive less rainfall are more likely to experience variability. Yaad hai ye wala point? The regions which receive less rainfall in our country are more likely to experience variability. Notes, you can go through your notes, bache. You have all this content in your notes. And that makes around 65% of India's total geographical area vulnerable to droughts of varying intensity. 33% vulnerable to chronic drought and 35% also vulnerable to intermittent drought. So a quick map of the rainfall regions of our country. Along with that, the reasons for meteorological drought. That takes care of meteorological. Then hydrological. Hydrological is because of surface and subsurface water scarcities, which can be because of rainfall patterns and can be because of mismanagement of water as well. Rainfall patterns, like I told you that for the northern plains, for replenishment of groundwater aquifers, we require steady, long duration rainfall, but not heavy downpours in a very short duration of time. So if there are more of extreme rainfall events which are increasing because of climate change, the replenishment of the groundwater aquifers will become more and more challenging. Right? So that's hydrological drought. And then agricultural drought. Agricultural drought is because of number of complex factors. Lack of institutional support, wrong crop choice, lack of credit, lack of irrigation facilities, because of which 55% of the country's net sown area becomes vulnerable to droughts. So the reasons for agricultural droughts as well. Right? Acha, this I should have told you earlier. Many a time, bache, if you don't understand the English interpretation very well, just have a look. If you're comfortable with Hindi, just have a look at the Hindi translation of the question as well. Right? कई बार तो the translation would be such that तुम्हें लगेगा यार इंग्लिश ही पढ़ लेते हैं, वो हिंदी तो बिल्कुल ही समझ नहीं आ रहा है. But sometimes that Hindi translation can come in handy. The next one बच्चे, अच्छा अब मैम कंक्लूजन में क्या लिखेंगे? कंक्लूजन में बच्चे the drought crisis management plan, you can mention about that there was a drought crisis management plan given by the central government. So you can just mention that, and that takes care of question 2B. 2B was a very direct question, like 2A.
Question 2C. Again, a 15-marker question. Discuss the ecological and economic challenges of river linking in India. Abhi, how will you introduce? See, 15-marker question, you will have to write introduction, you have to write some conclusion as well. How will you introduce? Actually, in the previous question, if you're concluding, then you might conclude with some of the problems, and you can also mention the recommendations. Just as we discussed about the Rangarajan panel's recommendations. Okay? So you can conclude the question with some positivity that there are certain problems, but the government is providing these subsidies and the reforms are required in the sugar industry. Okay? Just not more than 1 or 2 lines, because 10-marker question. Ecological and economic challenges of river linking. You can talk about the present water crisis in the country, the issues related to the shortage of water, scarcity of water, stress in India. And then you can say one of the techniques or one of the methods to tide over those crises is interlinking of rivers project, and National Perspective Plan has identified 30 interlinking components, 14 for Himalayan, 16 for peninsular. Okay? So discuss the ecological and economic challenges of river linking. See, when we talk about challenges, it means we have been trying for it and then we face the problem. If we will not try, we will never face the problem. Something that studies must have been done or plans must have been prepared, and then we will face the challenges. So if there are some projects which are attempted, that means there is some need for them. So you identify the need and then tell one of the methods to solve the problem is river linking project. And then you start with the answer. Now in this body, you can mention subheadings. Simple: economic challenges, what are the economic challenges? See, you will have to give examples here. Okay? When you talk about economic challenges, you will talk about the cost of the project. We discussed that in 2002, the cost was 5.6 lakh crores. Okay? So you have to cite examples. Second, when you talk about high cost, you give some figures here. Okay? Then can I say this cost increases because of long gestation period? These kind of projects have never been completed on time. So there are always time and cost overruns. So they have a long gestation period. We have a long gestation period, and as a result of which there are cost overruns. None of these sort of projects have been completed on time. Not only amount will be required for acquisition of the land, not only amount will be required for the construction of the dam, but amount will also be required for rehabilitation and resettlement of people. They have to be relocated to some new areas. New houses have to be constructed for those people. Okay? So, cost associated with land acquisition, cost associated with rehabilitation, resettlement. Okay? Then ecological challenges. यहाँ पर you have a lot of matter. ठीक है? Next subheading, ecological challenges. Then you have a lot of matter in this. You can talk about deforestation. You can talk about habitat loss. You can talk about the threat to the aquatic life. You can talk about the biodiversity loss. पन्ना टाइगर रिजर्व का एग्जांपल दे दो रिसेंटली केन बेतवा वाला. ठीक है? सिल्टेशन का एग्जांपल, यस. रिजर्वॉयर इंड्यूस्ड सीस्मिसिटी. सो यू हैव अ लॉट ऑफ मैटर ऑन इकोलॉजिकल. यहां पर चैलेंज नहीं है. ठीक है? यू कैन नॉट गेट एन इजियर क्वेश्चन. इससे आसान कोई क्वेश्चन मिल ही नहीं सकता आपको. ठीक है? अच्छा, देन इस क्वेश्चन में यू कैन ड्रॉ सम मैप्स. लाइक फॉर एग्जांपल, आफ्टर इंट्रोडक्शन यू कैन ड्रॉ अ मैप wherein you can show Ken Betwa link canal, or you can show Par Narmada Tapi interlinking river project. ठीक है? You can talk about Daman Ganga Pinjal interlinking river project. So एक map में, so that the answer looks geographical answer. See, one is in the conclusion you may write a word of caution, but do not leave the question just by identifying the problem. Also give a suggestion how to solve this problem. जैसे मैंने बोला, I have written in the conclusion that we should follow caution because there are certain concerns with this. A problem तो हर कोई गिना देगा. Everybody can tell the problems. What is solution that you can offer? Now you can offer the solution. The better method would be watershed management, which will involve less cost and which will also not pose any environmental problems. So this interlinking of rivers, every second, third year UPSC will ask this question. In GS, in mains, so every third, fourth year you will get this question at least. Discuss the importance of solar energy in future economic development of India. Examiner is asking about future economic development. Okay? Future economic development is talking about. And how the solar energy can help us in future economic development. Importance of solar energy in future economic development. Achha, if you have not, please prepare, because when you answer these kind of questions, you need to give examples. How will you otherwise discuss? You cannot discuss without examples. I told you, pick a region, pick a renewable energy source and find a case study for that. Yahan par what are the dimensions that you're going to touch in this question? See, it is a 20-mark question. How will you introduce the question? Emerging need of solar energy, commitment in Paris Agreement, Prime Minister's announcement, International Solar Alliance. Take. Listen please. There's certain terms that are economic development, solar energy. So the question is simply asking that how can solar energy can lead to future economic development. On what aspects will the future economic development of India will depend on? किस पे डिपेंड करेगा फ्यूचर इकोनॉमिक डेवलपमेंट? इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर पे, ओके, एनर्जी, इंडस्ट्रियल रेवोल्यूशन, गुड, टेक्नोलॉजी, ओके, See, when you talk about the renewable energy, we say that renewable energy is not only important for meeting our energy requirements, but renewable energy is also important for sustainable development of remote and inaccessible areas. Renewable energy is also important for employment generation. When we talk about future economic development, when you introduce the question, you can say that at present, almost 70% of the total power that is being generated in India, it is generated from the coal-based thermal power plants, which are highly polluting in nature. Okay? Moreover, coal is a finite resource, and exploration or exploitation of coal is associated with a number of environmental issues. Coal mining में environmental issues किए थे, power plant में environmental problems है, air pollution related problems, water pollution related problems. Now, so first you tell what is the need for clean energy in the country. There is a need for clean energy in the country, and India is actively pursuing the solar energy. Moreover, there is a lot of potential for solar energy generation. We have written just 3% of degraded land. If we are able to use that, we can generate 750 gigawatts of solar power in India. So there's a lot of potential. Tropical location, more than 300 days of direct sunshine. Now, future mein, when I talk about future economic development, we have discussed a number of times that we have a system wherein maximum people are engaged in agriculture, but agriculture contributes least to GDP. But we have maximum contribution by the service sector, and service sector employs least number of people. So what we need is, for future economic development, we need manufacturing sector. Can I say manufacturing industries are energy intensive? And at present, the energy that is generated largely is from coal, which is not a clean source. Environmental issues are there. So today, when we talk about sustainable development, future economic development has to be sustainable. So when we talk about the economic development, certain aspects of economic development, can I say per capita income, per capita consumption of power, we have per capita income, which is an indicator of economic development. Per capita consumption of power is an indicator of economic development. So when you talk about solar energy, one, it is cheap and renewable. It is cheap, it is a renewable source of energy. What today, if I talk about industrial development of India, what kind of industrial development we have? We have centralized development. What is the government talking about? Decentralization of industries. So what we also need is decentralized power generation. So what you are going to talk about? You're going to talk about the manufacturing sector, how we need to improve the manufacturing industries in India, then link manufacturing industries are energy intensive, okay? And then link it with coal, the problems with coal, and how solar energy can be helpful here. Then talk about the decentralized development of the country that we need in future. The large urban centers cannot accommodate the number of people that are moving into those urban centers. So we need decentralization of industries, for which we need decentralized power. Then talk about employment generation, link it with demographic dividend. decentralized employment generation. See, employment कैसे generate होगी? One is that the solar power projects themselves will employ some people and they're employment intensive. Second, how will it generate employment? Spillover effects. When energy comes to some area, then the industries can be set up, MSMEs can be set up, like handlooms can be converted to power looms. अच्छा, then future में, are we also looking at increasing the agricultural incomes? Doubling of farmers' income? क्या scheme है? PM Kusum? Can I link it with this? Future economic development? PM Kusum में not only it will save the amount that the farmer may be paying to the electricity authorities, but it can also sell power. Farmer can sell power and farmers can generate revenue. Farmers can generate income. ठीक है? Then towards the conclusion, see, if you're writing about challenges, you can write, but then provide a solution as well. Don't leave the question just with the challenges. So we can say that there are certain challenges related to the production of import of solar modules from China, or the challenges related to the rooftop installation, rooftop solar power. And then you can mention certain schemes along with that. ठीक है? Future में you can also link it with electric vehicles, which will be run with the solar power, because electric vehicles, if they run on the thermal power, then there's no purpose. ठीक है? And see, these kind of questions, if you are able to provide examples or case studies, then definitely you are going to get good marks. This is all very general. Everybody can think of this. But very few will have the case studies. So again, I'm saying prepare the case studies for solar energy, for wind energy, for biomass power, for small hydro, and how they have led to development of that region. See, what you can do is, northeast के लिए small hydro पकड़ लो, desert areas के लिए solar, northern plains के लिए biomass power, coastal areas के लिए wind. Please prepare a case study. ठीक है? अच्छा, 3B madam is going to discuss.
Critically examine the importance of Smart Cities program for solving urban problems in India. Smart Cities program for solving urban problems in India. And this is question number 3B. Now you introduce your answer by giving a brief about the Smart Cities program. The Smart Cities program started by Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs back in 2015. It aims to improve the livability of urban areas of our country, the cities which are selected under SCP. So it aims to improve the livability of the smart cities in our country. by improving the economies and by harnessing the technology. So improving livability by improving the economies and by harnessing the technology. That's Smart Cities program. Smart Cities program, bache, initially it was for a 5-year period terminating in 2019-2020, but now it has been extended. And Smart Cities program focuses upon certain elements. And what are the elements upon which SCP focuses upon? Water, sanitation, energy, urban mobility and public transport, health and education. So not just physical infra, but even social infra. Environment sustainability, affordable housing, IT connectivity. It focuses upon these kind of elements, and the objective is to make cities inclusive, safe, improve the livability, to make cities sustainable. These are the outcomes which are to be achieved under the Smart Cities program. So that's a brief introduction of the Smart Cities program. And then, bache, basically the question is whether the Smart Cities program can take care of the urban problems of India. So urban problems of India, I discussed with you urban problems in general, which had applicability in Indian context as well. Urban problems, we discussed that there are economic problems, urban problems in India, like poverty. And you remember I discussed with you, there is urbanization of poverty in our country because of migration from the rural areas to the urban areas, right? So poverty, that's an urban problem. Multiple deprivations, lack of housing, food insecurity, lack of education opportunities, multiple deprivations, inequality, lack of adequate physical infra, environmental problems like pollution, air pollution, water pollution, solid waste management issues. Along with that, the disaster vulnerability of the cities due to fast urbanization, due to unregulated urbanization. So disaster vulnerability of the cities. So these are the major urban problems, right? Now when we look at the elements which the Smart Cities program focuses upon, in principle, bache, Smart Cities program offers a promising vision. No doubt about it, that it offers a promising vision to solve the urban problems of our country. And what is the approach adopted under Smart Cities program? The approach adopted, matlab execution kaise hota hai? There is area-based development. In area-based development, there are 3 elements. One is redevelopment, retrofitting, and greenfield development. Area-based development mein what do? Is they select a part of a city under the Smart Cities program. For example, in Delhi, not entire Delhi, but the part of the Delhi which is under North Delhi Municipal Corporation is part of area-based development of Smart Cities program. Like Chennai, not entire Chennai, But T Nagar of Chennai, which is one of the posh colonies of Chennai, is under the Smart Cities program. So, usme there are three strategies: redevelopment, retrofitting, greenfield. Under redevelopment, what do they do? They raise down existing structures and they do new construction. And redevelopment is being done in Kidwai Nagar of Delhi. Tod do, bana hua, and then go for new construction. Retrofitting, bache, they upgrade the existing infra. That's retrofitting. And greenfield is the one which they do on vacant plot. That's greenfield. That's area-based development. And another approach under this is pan-city development. Pan-city development, like for the entire city, wastewater management solutions will be provided. Wastewater management solutions will be provided for the entire city. That's pan-city development. And how is the funding coming in? The funding is coming in through special purpose vehicle. Special purpose vehicle created for funding of Smart Cities program. Now, like I said, that the elements which the Smart Cities program is focusing upon are targeting on the right interventions. India needs to work upon the elements with Smart Cities program. Indian cities, they need to work upon the elements which the Smart Cities program is focusing upon. But when it comes to execution and implementation, there are gaps. And let me tell you, Bache 2020, there was this ease of living index for 111 cities in India. Ease of living index 2020 for 111 cities in the country. And this ease of living index, basically the objective of ease of living index is to inform the governments about the quality of lives and well-being of people. About the quality of lives and well-being of people. Governments have information about quality of lives and well-being of people. That's ease of living index. So, as per the ease of living index, there are gaps in urban policies, planning and implementation initiatives. Urban policies, there are gaps in urban policies, planning and implementation initiatives. Urban policies, planning and implementation initiatives. And when we talk of the Smart Cities mission, it is found that it is slow in implementation. Because the SPVs, the special purpose vehicles, aren't functioning well. The special purpose vehicles aren't functioning well. And overall, less than 50, this is from Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs data. Less than 50% of the projects have been completed at the end of 6-year period. Less than 50% of the projects have been completed at the end of 6-year period. Right? What does this mean? This means that presently, Smart Cities program is not equipped well to solve the entire gamut of urban problems in our country. Why is it so? Because one, it is for 100 cities. It does not cover entire urban population. It's for 100 cities. So the scope needs to be expanded. More cities need to be included. Then only it can solve the urban problems. With a selective approach of 100 cities, it cannot solve all the entire urban problems of our country. Then, bache, Smart Cities program cannot be a mid-term or a short-term program. It has to be a long-term program. Because urban problems in our country are chronic for a long time now. And they are complex. So, their solutions require time. So, 5 years program ending in 2019, 2020 and then extended, it should be Smart Cities mission should be a long-term program in our country. Then to solve the urban problems of our country, we need to empower the local governments. That's very important. Our local governments are short on funds and functionaries. I often tell that. They are, right now, they don't have adequate empowerment. They are financially strapped. They're short on functionaries as well. So empowerment of the local governments, wherever cities are doing well globally, the global example tells that cities prosper well or cities do well. That is, ease of living of the people improves, quality of life improves, the cities are sustainable. That's when the urban local governments are functioning well. They are empowered. So our urban local bodies, they need to be empowered. And then one thing with Smart Cities mission has to necessarily focus upon is building resilience to disasters. That must be a must component of the Smart Cities mission. Building resilience to disasters like urban flooding. Right? Because the T Nagar, ab maine bola ki yaar T Nagar is part of Smart Cities. T Nagar was the area which faced urban flooding when flooding of Chennai happened 2021. So it needs to necessarily focus upon disasters, the disaster management component. So if this is taken care of, then Smart Cities mission in the long run provides a panacea, or it will be capable of solving the urban problems of our country. But not in the present form, there are gaps. You know the stuff, you know the content. Yes, adding on knowledge is important. That will come with additional learning, additional reading. Additional reading, newspapers are a must for geography optional. Current affairs, you need to have a very good command. And you must practice more and more questions, because only when you practice more questions, you learn where you can apply what you have known. You know the reports, you know the content, you know the statistics. You must know where to write it. For that, you must start writing the answers, practicing the answers. So once your prelims gets over, you start with this on a priority basis. Right? And if in the question paper, there are questions which are completely from the surprise territory, unfamiliar territory, they are from unfamiliar territory for everybody, not just for you. But for a question paper of the type of 2021, which is from familiar territory, bache, you must be able to score well only if you have practiced. So you can score well only if you have practiced. Chaliye, that's all from my side. Thank you. Wish you all the best.
Examine the significance of ecotourism in relation to socio-economic development and biodiversity conservation in India. How will you start with this question? Again, यहाँ पर you can talk about the need for ecotourism. Before you define ecotourism, you talk about the need of ecotourism. What is the need for ecotourism in India? India is emerging as an important tourist destination of the world. The number of international and domestic tourists are increasing in the country. Okay? But mass tourism is associated with a number of issues. Mass tourism के क्या problem क्या है? We have problems of waste management. We have problems related to the local culture, which is disregarded very often. Wastage of resources or over exploitation of resources. And as an alternative, ecotourism has emerged. Okay? So ecotourism has emerged as an alternative to the mass tourism, which is associated with the problems, and then you define ecotourism. The material that is being given to you, usme there is the definition of ecotourism. You will also find it in Khullar or in Majid Hussain. Both will have the definition of ecotourism. Okay? Then again, what can be the areas of ecotourism in India? We can talk about the hilly regions of India, the Indian Himalayan regions, Western Ghats, okay, Purvanchal wala region. We can talk about the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. We can talk about Lakshadweep. Some matter was given to you for Andaman and Nicobar. We had examples of Radhanagar Beach in Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Lakshadweep mein coral tourism. Then what you can do is, once you have introduced it, then you can draw a map. Okay? Ecologically sensitive areas and the areas important for ecotourism in India. Okay? Then you can draw a map with the areas highlighted that are important for ecotourism. Then come to the main body. Significance in socio-economic development. Actually, recall the discussion we had, sustainable development of tourism in the Indian Himalayan states. See, we discussed certain things. We discussed socio-economic development. We talked about the ghost villages of Uttarakhand. We talked about money order economy. We talked about remoteness of the region. So, what will ecotourism do to these areas for socio-economic development? One is social development and second is economic development. Economic development mein can I talk about employment generation, linking it with the rural out-migration from these regions. Employment generation where I can link it with the money order economy. If employment is generated, I can link it with rural out-migration as well. Can I say it can lead to development of infrastructure? And infrastructure development again will generate some employment, like construction of resorts, eco-friendly resorts. Can I say it will lead to economic development of the host community? Term use kiya tha hum logon ne. Economic development of the host community. Because some amount that you are getting from the tourists, it is to be retained by the host community. Only this way it will become sustainable for those people. Now, social development mein popularization of the art forms, dance forms, cultural expansion. What is that mass tourism cannot do here? When we talk about this ecotourism, we will compare it with mass tourism. Mass tourism में क्या होता है? Disregard for local culture. ठीक है? We are not respecting the local culture. We are not respecting the local traditions, which is not the case in ecotourism. The culture of a place becomes popular in the other areas. For example, today I am eating South Indian food. Okay? I am eating idli for breakfast. That is not the food of my area. But somebody must have gone to that area, that food must have been popularized. So this is cultural expansion. This social development ka part hai. Now, what about the biodiversity conservation? How will ecotourism lead to biodiversity conservation? So again, I'll have to compare the mass tourism with the ecotourism here. Let's say I talk about construction of protected areas. Mass tourism versus ecotourism. Conservation of the local flora and fauna by two techniques. One, the tourist activities will not disturb that local flora and fauna. Second, the amount that is gained by the tourist activities. Suppose I go to, let's say, Jim Corbett National Park. I'll have to pay a ticket for visiting the forest. That amount can be used for the conservation of biodiversity. That is, ecotourism can help in situ conservation. It can help in situ conservation. Or suppose you go to a place, a popular attraction of a place can be a zoo. Abhi zoo mein also one idea is ex situ conservation. One of the purposes of zoo is that it will attract the tourist and it will be used for ex situ conservation. Or like today, we have Turtle Park in Varanasi. Chambal mein we have this crocodile sanctuary. All of these are parts of the ecotourism where objective is to conserve the biodiversity, both flora and fauna of that region. Had it been mass tourism, we will have all of those problems which we do not want for sustainable development of the region. Plus, a very important aspect of biodiversity conservation is environmental ethics and sensitivity. If I go for ecotourism, I learn a number of things. I learn how to respect the flora, how to respect the fauna. I know that this is not what I do not do or what I should not do. So after ecotourism, the behavioral change comes in the person. Okay, so there is a change in the behavior, and we have another component as environmental ethics. Okay. So two subheadings: socio-economic development. You'll talk about social development. You'll talk about economic development. Okay, refer to the notes for the two things. Then second subheading, you'll talk about biodiversity conservation, and then you talk about marine national parks, protected areas, zoos. Okay. You can talk about environmental ethics. एक तो इंट्रोडक्शन के बाद we'll have a map, areas for ecotourism. We need policies and framework to implement ecotourism. Okay. You can cite certain examples here. Measures to promote ecotourism. Community participation. लिखा था ये? ठीक. Try attempting this question as well. Question 4A. Discuss the reserves, distribution and production of all varieties of coal in India. Again, a simple, straight question. 20 marks. Question on the expected lines. Three: reserves, distribution and production. All varieties. 20 marks. Introduction. Importance of coal in Indian economy. Very good. The simplest and the easiest introduction is you start with the importance of coal in the Indian economy. क्या importance है? Energy generation, steel industry, लिखा था हम लोगों ने coal is necessary for development. ठीक है? So why coal is necessary for development? You just write it here. ठीक है? Importance of coal. Then subheadings, reserves. क्या लिखोगे? मदान with map with all areas. See, ये distribution नहीं है मदान. We are not talking about distribution here. We are just talking about reserves. Now start with bit of geography here. You will start that a number of areas in the geological past in India have undergone rifting and subsidence. You can talk about Narmada, Son, Godavari lineament. ठीक है? That resulted in the formation of coal. That resulted in formation of coal. अच्छा आपको एक बताया था मैंने that according to Geological Survey of India 2017 we have 315 billion tons of coal reserves. We have 315 billion tons of coal reserves up to depth of 1200 meters. याद है आप लोग को? Out of which 280 billion tons is the non-coking coal, 35 billion tons is the coking coal deposit. If you can recall this, we've also written that India is having 4th largest reserves of coal in the world. Then yahan par they have written all varieties. Then you're going to tell the examiner that you also know what are the different varieties of carbon that are present. Then you can say we not only have reserves of Gondwana coal, but we have reserves of tertiary coal as well as lignite reserves are also present in the country. Okay? So one subheading, you talk about reserves. Okay? Then what about distribution? What about distribution? Yes, map of distribution of Gondwana, lignite and tertiary coal. Okay. So you will talk about the distribution of coal in different parts of India and separate maps for Gondwana, tertiary and lignite deposits. Otherwise, there will be too much of confusion within the same map. Okay? Or if you are drawing the same map, if you can use a colored pen, but otherwise it is better to draw smaller and more number of maps. The visibility is better in that case. So yahan par you'll not talk about states, but you'll talk about the districts and the mine fields, that is coal mines you'll talk about. Okay? So we'll talk about the Jharia coal fields, we'll talk about Chirmiri coal fields, we'll talk about the Jhilmil coal fields, Sohagpur coal fields. Okay? Coal fields in Bokaro, Lakhanpur coal fields. Okay? So areas important for coal and what are the coal fields in these regions. People know all of this. Okay. Then for tertiary coal you will mention the areas of Changlang, Tirap, Namphuk, Namchik, Makum, Maolong, चिरापूंजी, ठीक है. लिग्नाइट में नेवेली, पलाना, उमरसार, ठीक है. सो डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन में एटलीस्ट वन मैप इज अ मस्ट. ठीक है. यू हैव टू राइट इट एंड यू ऑल्सो हैव टू शो इट ऑन अ मैप. देन व्हाट अबाउट प्रोडक्शन? See, you cannot always have figures with you. Let's say I say production of coal in India is 750 or 720 million tons. Last year, this was the figure. But it is impossible for you to remember all of these, knowing that where you don't know that what can be the question. So what will you write here in production? No, not mining methods, not technology. At least you can talk about that maximum of the coal reserves are in Jharkhand, but maximum of the production is from Odisha. Okay? Yahan par what we need to write is, yes, Aditya, that despite India having so much of coal, despite coal very well distributed in the regions mentioned above, we have to import coal because production is not sufficient. You can highlight the less production of coal despite India having the resources. Then you can talk in terms of what are the different companies or what are the different sectors under which coal mining is done. You will say that more than 80% of the coal is mined by whom? CIL and its subsidiaries. Then coal of peninsular India is mined by Singarani Collieries Company Limited. Some is captive mines. Some of the coal comes from the captive miners. And now even what has been allowed? Commercial mining since 2017. So some coal comes from the commercial mines, though insignificant portion. Then you can also talk about the lignite mining. Neyveli Lignite Company is mining coal in the areas of Tamil Nadu, even in Palana, in Rajasthan. Okay? Then towards the conclusion, you can talk about how effectively we can mine coal, where you can mention certain technologies. You can mention about the certain reforms that the government has recently taken up for captive miners, for commercial mining. Okay. So this was one of the most predictable questions this year. Okay, we could easily predict that we will have a question on coal this year. Describe the salient features of east-flowing rivers of India, 15 marks. Again, a direct and straight question. Acha, what about introduction? Talking a little bit about geography. Physiography, slope of India towards east. Again, herein you can talk about the watershed of India, where you can talk about geological history, wherein you can say that the plateau is tilted towards north and tilted towards east. Okay? And then it is defining the watershed where 80% of the water, it flows towards Bay of Bengal from the country. Okay? Ajay, when you talk about this east flowing rivers, what all will you include here? See, every river you cannot mention here. विवेक, ईस्ट फ्लोइंग बोल रहा हूं मैं. Yes, Rajat says Himalayan Peninsular. Just make a categorization, Himalayan rivers and peninsular rivers. So, east flowing rivers of Himalaya and east flowing rivers of peninsular India. Because if you keep on discussing each and every river, then you don't have time, you don't have space for it. Okay, so you can first write about the geological history. You can talk about watershed, that 80% of water flows to the areas of Bay of Bengal from India. And one reason is the tilt of the plateau towards north and tilt of the plateau towards east. Achha, if I talk about peninsular India, salient features, east flowing rivers. Origin, okay. So one origin largely from Western Ghats, a number of rivers originating from the eastern hills as well, like Mahanadi and its tributaries. Maximum of these rivers, they start from Chhattisgarh and the areas around it. Some rivers, they even start from the areas of Karnataka plateau. Okay. Okay, so one is origin. So you may mention about Pennar River, where it is starting. You may mention about Mahanadi River. You can talk about the east flowing rivers like Krishna, Godavari, Kaveri starting from Western Ghats, Tungabhadra. Okay, yes, first is origin. Achha, keep the reference as the lecture that we had on the difference between Himalayan and peninsular rivers. वहां पर features लिखा था एक term. We discussed about the Himalayan rivers and peninsular rivers. What were the features that we mentioned? See, we talked about meander formation. We talked about type of streams, whether they are antecedent, whether they are superimposed. We talked about drainage patterns. We talked about age. In terms of patterns, if I talk about, याद करो महानदी, rectangular, ठीक है, it is rectangular drainage. If I talk about type, most of these rivers are consequent streams, but in certain stretches they also become superimposed. Like which rivers become superimposed? Remember we discussed that in certain stretches Krishna river is superimposed, Cheyeru river is superimposed. In stretches Godavari around Wardha where it meets Pranheta, it is superimposed in that stretch. जैसे किया था, these are graded streams. ये लिखा था कुछ? मदान? Graded streams. अच्छा, have they reached their base levels? Old rivers, graded streams, they have reached their base levels. Senile topography, good. Acha, then east flowing rivers of Himalayas, where you can write about Ganga river system. यहाँ पर features में you first talk about the valleys, V-shaped valleys or gorges that they are creating. Then talk about alluvial fans that they are forming. ठीक है, यहाँ पर give certain examples. Not only Ganga is forming alluvial fan, but if you look at Damodar river, we discussed that Damodar, Ajay, Roop Narayan, when they fall from the Chota Nagpur plateau, they form the alluvial cones, alluvial fans. These are also east flowing rivers, part of the Ganga river system. River capture you can talk about. Yamuna is east flowing. It is said that Yamuna has captured Saraswati. Meandering you can talk about. Delta formation you can talk about. Okay. So you have too much of matter to write in this question. Okay. So try to write certain things, explain them, and then draw schematic, and then just write the keywords there. ठीक है, suppose आपने इसको explain कर लिया, then इसको एक schematic में दिखा दिया, and then you can draw the sketch of the rivers as well with the rivers and the tributaries. Okay. Then towards the conclusion, you can talk about conservation, you can talk about the schemes related to rejuvenation of the rivers, their importance. Okay? But do not end the question with a problem. Okay? If you're mentioning some problems in the conclusion, you also provide a solution or a scheme for that. Or just simply we need to conserve the water. Okay? Spiritual significance, better write cultural significance लिख लो इससे अच्छा, ठीक है, that would be a better word here. Then question 4C. Critically examine the problem of interstate border disputes. Again, this kind of question very few students would be able to attempt. जिन्होंने पढ़ा उन्हें आता, otherwise you cannot attempt this question. But this was on the expected lines. So what is to be written? Are you able to recall the discussion we had on interstate border disputes? Now, how will you introduce the question? States reorganized on linguistic lines, very good. Various disputes. Impact of dispute in security due to cultural difference. Colonial rule made it complex. Federal structure. I would consider that this is the best introduction that you can have. Introduce by talking about the federal structure of India. See, the origin of disputes is because of this, that we have reorganized the states and the federalism. Okay? So you can talk about the federal structure in the country and the basis of or geographical basis of federalism in India. Okay? Then again a simple straight question, and the word here is examine. There is a 15-mark question. So because they have mentioned examine, that means in-depth analysis is required here. Everything that you have written in the class, you cannot mention in 150, 200 words here. You pick up certain areas which are more important, which have been in news lately. As we have discussed about what all disputes have we discussed about? We discussed about Assam Meghalaya. Assam Meghalaya mein related to what districts? Golpada, Karbi Anglong, no need to note it down, you have all of this in your notes. Then in case of Assam, Arunachal Pradesh, Dimaji, Darang, Assam, Nagaland, Assam, Mizoram, it was in news recently, because of which they have asked this question. Lushai Hills, Assam, Mizoram mein, Kachar district, certain keywords we used here. Assam, Mizoram mein, what was the some keywords? Just tell me the keywords that if you remember any of these. (1873) का एक्ट था, implemented in 1875. Very often ये northeastern region में we have used a committee, Bordoloi committee, if you remember. 3-4 जगह we have used this. Acha, other than this, we have disputes between the areas of Himachal and the areas of Ladakh. किसको related था? No, not Lahul and Spiti. पोटवार कहां से आया यहां पर? वेरी गुड, सरचू. अच्छा, एक और था हिमाचल हरियाणा. हिमाचल हरियाणा में इस पंचकुला में देयर वाज अ प्लेस परवाणु. बेलगाम, बेलगावी, महाराष्ट्र, कर्नाटका. ठीक है. सो you have the material with you, but you cannot mention all of this. And yes, Abhishek Bishnoi also told me, we mentioned in class later on, Andhra and Odisha. Andhra claiming certain districts of Koraput. Okay. So you have the material, you introduce the question with the federal structure of India. And once you have done with the federal structure of India, then you can mention 4 or 5 of them. Okay. Just pick 2, 3 from northeastern India, which have been in news. It is better that you pick up those. Plus, uske alawa, rest of that you can mention in the schematic. 2, 3 northeastern India, say 1 from southern India, 1 from, let's say, north India. And then if you are left with any of those, you can mention on the schematic. Conclusion. You can talk about the interstate cooperation. Sir, Andhra Odisha dispute is dormant. I mean, recently it was there in news. ठीक है. कुछ elections हुए थे, उसके वजह से it was in news. So you can talk about interstate cooperation, why it is needed, how it can lead to overall development. ठीक है. So important ones you explain, and less important ones where you don't have much of matter, you can just write in the schematics in the form of that. Plus, in these kind of questions, you will have to draw a map. Section B, question 5B, I'm taking up. Ten marks, question 5B. Describe the problems of cloud burst in India, giving suitable examples. What is the examiner asking you here? He's asking you the effect of cloud bursts. Okay, so he's not asking you about the mechanism of cloud burst. He's asking what are the problems of cloud burst in India, and you have to explain it with examples. Okay, you have to describe. Achha, when you introduce the question, just a 10-mark question, you can just introduce the question by talking about what is cloud burst. Okay, you can give the definition given by IMD, that if there is more than 100 mm of rainfall in 1 hour, then it is cloud burst. If there is more than 50 mm of rainfall in 1 hour, sorry, in 2 hours, then it is a mini cloud burst. And this is also a question directly from the current affairs. This year in number of newspapers we had this cloud burst. Even in the Indian Express we had an explained section for this cloud burst phenomena. Okay. Now, you introduce the question by talking about what is cloud burst. If possible, a small diagram you can make. You can talk about orographic lift. Okay. You can talk about sudden rainfall. Okay. If possible, because it is just a 10-mark question, you may not find enough of space for all of these things. There's 2-3 lines of introduction where you just define what is cloudburst phenomena according to IMD. Then what can be the problems, and with examples he is asking you the problems. Describe the problems. If I'm using 2 terms, explain and describe, what is the difference? Difference between the 2 terms. There's a literal meaning. I suppose I say, explain this phenomena. Okay? Explain the phenomena of monsoon. Second is describe the monsoon. Describe, you'll say, this happens, then this happens, then this happens. Explain me, if this happens, then why it is happening. Understanding it? Explain me, you have to tell that if this is happening, then what is the reason behind it? Explain cloudburst. Describe me, you will just describe what you are going to see. Explain me what is a causative factor as well. What is leading to this? The examiner is not asking you about explaining the problems of cloudburst. He is asking you describe the problem of cloudburst in the country with suitable examples. If there is a cloudburst, can I say one important problem can be flash floods. This can be the biggest problem with the cloudburst. अभी यहाँ पर you have to describe through examples. ठीक है? You have to describe through examples. अभी यहाँ पर when you talk about examples, you can take any example, like for example Kedarnath floods, the example that you can find anywhere. Excess of rainfall on 14th, 15th of June, or you can say middle of June in 2013, which was due to cloudburst, led to the lake burst. It resulted in flash floods. ठीक है? Yes, glacial lake outburst flood, which one reason was the high amount of water that accumulated in this area due to cloudburst, where the GLF happened because of this. Okay? You can mention about that many people lost their lives, property damage was there. You just have to describe it, but give relevant examples. Other than this, what can be the problems here? We had a number of landslides this year. Yes, it may trigger landslides. Landslides and mass movement. Take landslides, mass movement. Example. Like one example that I can think of is 1998. Pithoragarh district. Very heavy rainfall or cloudburst in that region led to landslides, and a number of Mansarovar pilgrims, they were stuck there for days. Western Ghats, we have a number of landslides, like for example, once it happened in Pune because of cloudburst. Can I say one problem can be loss of connectivity? Loss of connectivity. Like you can talk about the mini cloudburst that we had in Nainital this year. Whole of the district was cut off. So see, soil liquefaction is largely the after effect of earthquakes. ठीक है, ये mass movement you can mention, liquefaction का mechanism थोड़ा difference होता है. It is where because of the waves of the earthquake, the water enters in between the solid particles of the rock or the soil, and the soil starts gliding over one another, and whole of the area collapses. Concept थोड़ा सा difference है. ठीक. ठीक है. So this is a 10-mark question. So you can write some other issues, like for example, you can write about the ecological impact, let's say. Habitat loss due to landslides, due to flash floods. Then towards the conclusion, you can mention about the better information techniques or prediction techniques for the cloudbursts, because maximum of these cloudbursts, they happen in the month of June and July, or sorry, July and August. This is the time of monsoon, where maximum of the orographic lift happens. So we can have better prediction mechanisms so that we can prevent this cloudburst. Okay? Early warning systems, yes. Discuss the role of watershed management for soil and water conservation in the hilly regions, hilly areas of India. ऋषि पानी ला सकते हैं? Thank you. Madan says, can we put EIA in conclusion? I don't think you can put it here, Madan. See, what you can do is, if you want to conclude, you can talk about the climate change as well. Okay, because the instances are increasing because of the increase in the temperature. You can talk about global warming, mitigation strategies for that. Discuss the role of watershed management for soil and water conservation in the hilly regions of India. Again, a very simple question. All of you would be able to attempt this question without much of a thought. First keyword, watershed management, soil and water conservation. Again, on the expected lines, Jal Shakti Abhiyan mein, the idea was water conservation, catch the rain where it falls when it falls. Okay. So you'll introduce the topic. Again, 10 mark question hai. So you'll introduce the topic by defining what is watershed management, or what is the rationale of watershed management. Okay. So why do we need watershed management, or what is watershed management? You'll introduce not more than 2-3 lines. Then role in soil conservation and water conservation. Again, in this kind of question, it is very good if you can give the case studies, or if you can give examples. They go case study ke liye we don't have much of space here because just a 10 mark question is there. So you can put in examples. नीति आयोग में compendium of best practices पढ़ने को बोला था. So those examples can be used here if it is there for hilly region. हिमाचल के 2-3 examples थे वहां पर. 1 or 2 examples of Uttarakhand were there. So यहाँ पर in case of soil conservation, you can mention about contour banding, trenching, terracing. So you can mention certain systems. We discussed like Chal Khal systems, Aji system you can mention. All of these are related to the hilly regions. Water conservation mein, traditional systems of water conservation of hilly areas, Zings, Kuls, Zabo, Nola, bamboo drip irrigation, Surangam. ठीक है. What else? For success of watershed management, what do we need? Community participation, bottom-up approach, decentralized planning. Okay, so you will answer the question, just a short introduction, 2-3 lines. Then the role in soil conservation, water conservation. You can mention about water harvesting structures. You can talk about these things, what we have done in class. And then you can, towards the conclusion, you can write about the role of community participation. Okay? Decentralized planning, bottom-up approach. Tawseef se Pani Panchayat, yes, you can talk about Pani Panchayats here. Okay? So again, a very simple question on the expected lines. 5D. A 10-mark question, critically examine the relevance of Ravenstein's laws of population migration with reference to India. Critically examine means that you have to tell me how you have understood this topic. Suppose I'm a doctor. I want to examine you. What will I say? Take a deep breath. You will take a deep breath. Show me your tongue. Open up the mouth wide. Then turn your back. Then doctor is going to examine me. He is understanding each and every aspect. Only then he is going to diagnose what is the disease. Okay? Similarly, when you are examining, you are going for in-depth analysis. And critically means that you have to tell the critiques as well. Suppose I am saying, critically examine the relevance of Ravenstein's law of population migration with reference to India. You will have to tell me how is this relevant in India and what are those points that we see in the Indian migration which we don't find in the Ravenstein's laws. You have to be critical as well. Okay? Is my point understood by everyone? Ravenstein पढ़ा है आप लोगों ने? You know about Ravenstein's laws? You might not be able to remember. 7-8 points are there. One is that the migration generally happens for short distances. Then there are currents of migration which are set. No, it is not intervening opportunities, Vivek. That is Stoffer's law. So there are migration currents. Yes, Rajat, with every migration current, we have counter currents. The natives of the urban areas are less likely to migrate than the natives of the rural areas. Improvement in technology increases the chances of migration. Females migrate to shorter distances. Okay, 7-8 points are there that madam must have told you. Now, the question is, how is this relevant to India? देखो इस क्वेश्चन में you don't have much of space. ठीक? If you keep on explaining Ravenstein's laws, then you won't be able to address the question. ठीक? You just have to directly come to the question. If you want to explain Ravenstein, not more than in schematic. ठीक? Ravenstein's laws and 7-8 Ravenstein's laws, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 like this. Not more than this, because just a 10-mark question is there and a lot of things need to be explained here. Okay. So you can start the question by talking about migration. Okay. That migration is one of the important factors that decides the demography of an area. Okay. You can talk about migration in India. Okay, you can start the question just 1 or 2 lines because there's a lot of material to write here. So first law, most of the people migrate to short distances. It sets up the currents and the migration is taking place to centers of commerce and industry. Second, stages. Much of the migration takes place in stages. Let's say I am a person living in Barabanki. I will migrate to Lucknow and a person from Lucknow will migrate to Delhi. Okay. Or let's say I am a person in the regions of, let's say I'm a person in the regions of a village in Karnataka, let's say. I'm going to migrate to a town and from that town, let's say Belgaum, a person from a town migrates to the regions of, let's say, Bangalore. So migration happens in stages. This is the second. Third, it says the urban people are less likely to migrate. Than the rural people. Then it talks about counter currents. Role of technology. With better technology, more migration. Females, short distances. Yes, Rajat, in introduction, that can be very easily done, or that would be very effective as well if you can start the question with highlighting the current crisis of migrants. Okay? But the answer, the introduction should not be more than 2-3 lines because we have a number of things to write here. Yeah, but are these things applicable in India? 1880 में Ravenstein gave the law of migration, where it says that short distances को migration होता है, then the migration, it sets off the currents, and the current is from the area of out migration to the area of commerce and industry. Do we see this? Yes, much of the migration that is taking place in India, the economic migration, it is from the underdeveloped states to the industrialized regions, like migration from Bihar to Maharashtra, migration from Odisha to Gujarat, from underdeveloped areas to developed regions. What can be the exception or critical point here? यहाँ पर he says that migration is towards centers of commerce and industry, but in India we also find is migration is also related to agriculture. Every year people from Bihar, Eastern UP, Bengal, they will migrate to Punjab and Haryana where they work as agriculture workers. ठीक, understood? Then migration takes place in stages. That first you migrate to a large town, then you might migrate to a metropolitan area, and when you leave your position in a large town, that might be occupied by a person who is coming from a remote village. This is what we find in India. That in the first instance, you won't migrate to a large metropolitan center, you would like to migrate to a place which is near to you. Then in the second stage, you will migrate to a large metropolitan center. Urban people are less likely to migrate than the rural counterparts. When we talk about migration in India, if I look at rural-urban migration, rural-rural migration, when we talk about the urban to rural migration, which will make maximum of the people? Maximum number of people migrate from rural areas to the rural areas. Okay? In India, when we talk about the migration, maximum people migrate from rural areas to rural areas. And majority of these are women who migrate after marriage. Counter currents. If people are migrating from Bihar to Maharashtra, will there be a migration from Maharashtra to Bihar as well? After a certain age, I would like to return to my native place. Delhi is my workplace. Delhi is not my hometown. One day when I decide to hang my boots, then I will migrate to my hometown. So counter currents are also present. We have seen this in the country as well. Now, role of technology with better technique, more migration. Is it possible? It is possible to migrate to far off places because of the communication systems. With the expansion of the railway network, with better connectivity between different areas. Suppose I live in Lucknow. Delhi today is as near to me as is Bangalore. Because there is a good connectivity between Lucknow and Delhi, good connectivity between Bombay and Lucknow, and between Bangalore and Lucknow. It's just a matter of 1 hour or 15 minutes. So, if there is a better connectivity with better technology, their chance of migration also increases. Females migrate to short distances. Yes, we find this in India. The patrilineal societies, patrilineal में क्या होता है? The women, they leave their house and they go to the husband's place. This is what we find. The critical points. अभी क्या critical, क्या missing है इस पे? One, we have discussed this agriculture related migration. When Ravenstein gave the law in 1880, he was talking about the females migrating to short distances from rural areas to the urban centers in search of jobs. But in India, when the females generally migrate, most of the migration is because of cultural reasons. So Ravenstein in his law has not talked about cultural migration. He just talked about the economic migration. Achha, if I look at the history of migration in India, when did maximum number of people migrated? When did maximum number of people migrate? Partition. That is forced migration. Has he mentioned anything related to forced migration? So we have a number of migrants in India like Tibetan refugees. We had a number of migrants like Kashmiri Pandits. We have a number of migrants like people who migrated after partition. Nothing is mentioned here. So nothing about forced migration or migration due to religious persecution. Okay. And then towards the conclusion, you can mention the role of migration in increasing population, decreasing population, and so on, in changing the demography of an area. Okay. अच्छा, यहाँ पर climate induced migration का India में don't find many instances. It is not mentioned here. Don't find many instances. Yes, a point I missed, development induced displacement, very good. That is forced migration. They have not considered any kind of forced migration here. Okay. (5E). Again, a very simple question. We won't discuss this much. So examiner is asking about, discuss Ashok Mitra's classification method of Indian cities. Ashok Mitra's classification method of Indian cities. A simple straight question directly from the book. Okay. We have discussed this in class as well. What is the method? Statistical technique, census data, 1961 census, categorization of workers under 9 categories, then further categorization under 3. Equilateral triangle, do you remember? Then circles drawn, 6 whole number 2 by 3, 11 whole number 2 by 3, 16 whole number 2 by 3. ठीक. अच्छा, then इसमें how will you introduce the question? Again 10 marks का है. The need for classification. Why do we need classification of cities? Or what is the need for functional classification of cities? It's a method of function classification, no? So what is the need for function classification? Then you will have to draw the triangle, the equilateral triangle with the circles. Okay? Perpendiculars drawn. If you can recall the diagram. Okay? That diagram is to be drawn. Then he is not asking you what was the result. So you've written it. If you remember, you can just give a passing reference. Otherwise, result is not asked by the examiner here. Okay? Then towards the end, you can mention that it is still considered as the best method of the functional classification of the cities. Okay, then question 6A. A 20-mark question. Explain the impact of tropical cyclones and western disturbances on the climate of India. He's asking about the impact and impact on climate. ठीक है? Cyclone से disaster वाला this is not what he's asking. Examiner is not asking about the damage that the cyclone creates, but how will the cyclone impact the climate? How will the western disturbance impact the climate? Not asking about weather, impact the climate. How will you introduce the question then? Rhythm पूछा ही नहीं एग्रीकल्चर इम्पैक्ट. So introduction में there is nothing which can be right or which can be wrong. Even if you introduce the topic related to agriculture, it depends on how well you introduce it. Long-term effect, describe the climate of India. See, what I think is that we can start the question by saying that we have monsoon type of climate in India, where the climate of the country is largely affected by the monsoon winds. But other than monsoon, there are other phenomena which affect the climate of the country. Okay? There are other phenomena which impact the climate condition of India, like tropical cyclones, like western disturbances. Okay, can I say so? That monsoon is the major factor, but other than monsoon, there are other factors which are impacting the climate of the country. Actually, now tropical cyclone and western disturbance. Now you can give a heading, subheading, tropical cyclone, then you can show what all areas are impacted by tropical cyclone in the country. Or just to improve the visibility, you can draw the structure of a cyclone. Okay, better will be that if you can show the areas which are affected. Achha, what is the impact of tropical cyclone on climate? What is the impact? So I have not done this topic. Rizwan sir has done this topic of tropical cyclones. What is the impact on climate? See, one is that when we talk about the climate, if I look at the reasons for rainfall in the peninsular parts of India, suppose I talk about Tamil Nadu, we say approximately 49% of the rainfall in Tamil Nadu is from northeast monsoon. Okay? Some amount of rainfall in Tamil Nadu, around 30-35% is from the southwest monsoon, the areas around Coimbatore, Nilgiri. Wahan par rainfall is from southwest monsoon. What about rest of the rainfall? Can I say rest of the rainfall is largely because of the cyclones that affect this area? So when we talk about the climatic impact, it brings rainfall to many regions of peninsular India. And in certain areas like Rayalaseema, in certain areas like coastal Andhra, in Tamil Nadu, we have good amount of precipitation every year, which is contributed by the tropical cyclone. Okay. Then, when we discussed about monsoon, we discussed about the variation in the monsoon. We discussed about the dry spells. We also discussed about the wet spells or excess rainfall. Do you remember something like monsoon trough? There is a trough that is formed over the Indo-Gangetic plains. And sometimes, if you remember, the trough tilts towards the south because of low pressure conditions in Bay of Bengal. What can be the reason for that low pressure? One reason can be tropical cyclones. So tropical cyclones induce low pressure systems on the ocean, that is, induces low pressure systems on Bay of Bengal, on Arabian Sea, and it can increase or decrease the intensity of rainfall. Okay? So the effect of tropical cyclones on the monsoon as well. This effect of tropical cyclone on the monsoons as well. Then the temperature changes, the winds, though these are very short term. So towards the end you can mention. Okay, because temperature changes, wind changes, they are short term phenomena. Now, western disturbances effect on climate. One is winter precipitation. Everybody is going to mention winter precipitation. That is rainfall in the northern plains, snowfall in the Himalayan regions that can even stretch up till the regions of Arunachal. Very good. Cold waves. And what are these? What are these? You have not revised. Western disturbance, they are not jet streams. Kanishka, Alok. These are not HCWJ. ये क्या है western disturbance? What is this western disturbance? But these are low pressure systems. Low pressure systems which are remnants of the temperate cyclones. Their movement towards India is influenced by the STWJ. And they are known as western disturbances because they change the path of subtropical westerly jet. Okay? Achha, coming to cold waves. Below 16 degree day temperature for 3 continuous days is a cold wave. Where have you read this definition, Abhishek? See, IMD says cold wave will be declared in an area if it is a plain where the mean temperature is less than 10 degrees. Okay? Only then we will consider whether this area will have a cold wave or not. Heat wave kiya tha hum logon ne. So heat wave, we discussed that there will be certain conditions only when it will be declared. So we will look at other conditions if first condition is satisfied. If the mean temperature of the day is less than 10 degrees in the plains, only then we will consider whether there is a cold wave or not. Now we'll look at the temperature variation. And if the temperature variation is between 4.5 degrees to 6.4 degrees minus mein, compared to the normal temperature of that area in that particular time period, then it will be a cold wave. If the temperature variation is more than 6.5 degrees minus, then it will be a severe cold wave. Okay, IMD ki website, you can check the definition. So one is winter precipitation, second is cold wave. What else? Very good, Chandrika. Dust storms. 2018, there was a question on dust storms. So one reason for the increased instances of dust storms in 2018 was the frequent arrival of the western disturbances in the country, because these are low pressure systems. Okay. Provide water. See, we are not talking about what is significance of disturbance. The question is about how will it impact the climate. Okay. So it is dust storms. Now, towards the conclusion, what is to be written? Lou, again, Tausif is not related to this. Yes, you can mention about the increased frequency of tropical cyclones, how more of tropical cyclones are now affecting the areas of Arabian Sea as well, how even in the months of April we have frequent instances of the western disturbances. Take it towards this, you can take your question. Question 6B. examine the critical issues of groundwater resources in India. But are dust storms regular phenomena to be included? Yes. Every year we have the thunderstorms. Every year we have the dust storms. जैसे the pre-monsoon rainfall, what we call as Kali Andhi. Kali Andhi is always associated with dust because this is an area which is near to Rajasthan, Delhi wala region. Kal Baisakh, what is it? It is a thunderstorm. Okay? So mango showers, all of these are thunderstorms. So dust storms, thunderstorms, one and the same thing. You can write thunderstorms as if you are not comfortable with this dust storm. Okay? Then examine the critical issues of groundwater resources in India. Again, a question on the expected lines. Draft national water policy, क्या क्या issues हैं groundwater के? Directly from the draft. Acha, first, how will you introduce the question? Critical issues of groundwater resources in India. Accessing groundwater in India, need for conservation of groundwater, second biggest source of fresh water, decrease in groundwater level, groundwater reserves and importance, depletion, amount of usage of groundwater. So you can start any way if you want to. A 15-marker question is there. You can start by telling about the situation of groundwater in India, how India is using the groundwater, what is the importance of groundwater in India. ठीक है? Now, critical issues क्या हैं? What are the critical issues? Again, water management में we have quantitative and qualitative. We have quantitative and qualitative issues. ठीक है? Quantitative में groundwater depletion. ठीक है? Groundwater depletion. You can give examples here. We've discussed, एक figure दी थी आपको, wherein the exploitation is more than 100% in 16 districts. 1991 में it was just 3%. We discussed about the areas, the states where the exploitation is more than, or development is more than 100%. Depletion ka, you have a lot of information related to depletion. Recall the national water policy, draft of national water policy, and tell me what can be the second quantitative issue, critical issue. नहीं, वो क्वांटिटेटिव हो गया मोहित. क्वांटिटेटिव में सेकंड क्रिटिकल इशू टॉक अबाउट. टेल मी. डिमांड साइड मैनेजमेंट, ये तो इसी में आ गया. आदित्य प्रताप सिंह, वेरी गुड. The regional variability. That is, groundwater is not present in every area. RL Singh scheme or the different rocks, consolidated, unconsolidated rocks. अब इसमें माइक्रो लेवल पे वन वेरी क्रिटिकल इशू इज हु ओन्स द ग्राउंड वाटर, ओनरशिप राइट्स. Groundwater is present under my land, groundwater is present under your land as well. But I am a rich person, I can afford to dig to 100 feet. You cannot dig to 100 feet. So I will suck up all the groundwater. How will you establish the ownership right? Recall the draft water policy. We have mentioned this. It says that we need Pani Panchayats, water user associations. We need to establish the ownership right. Governance of groundwater is a term that we used. Then quantitative में contamination you will talk about. इसमें also you have the figures with you. Another table was given to you. Arsenic contamination, nitrate contamination, fluoride contamination. The areas that are affected. You have a lot of matter on this. See, if you're not able to recall at this point of time, no need to worry. See, it is not with only you, but it will be with everyone. Okay? So, because you are reading a number of things, you last read geography, let's say a month back. And in this next 1 month, you have written or you have read a number of new things, you have revised a number of new things. So it is normal for you to forget. Okay? No need to worry. But if you keep on revising, see, what is the point of having this kind of discussion? The point is you must know how is the examiner framing the question, what is the trend. Signed out. बस 5 मिनट और ठीक. See, the trend is that the questions, the things which have been in news this year, it has less of current affairs, but still a number of questions could have been predicted. Border वाला easy से predict हो सकता था, border dispute वाला. Ground water predictable, landslides predictable. ठीक है. The question on, there's one more question on industrial corridors. This is also predictable because it has been of late, it has been in news of late. So उसमें some material has been given to you. We have discussed that in class as well. Diagram वगैरह सब आपके पास है. The predictable question is coal, solar energy, interlinking is always predictable. Watershed management, Jal Shakti Abhiyan. So most of the questions, see, there will be certain questions which nobody must have read. There will be questions wherein we have, or even yes, lightning paper or this lightning that was in paper 1. Okay? So because number of instances have taken place for lightning, some reports have come. So examiner also keeps a tab of all of these things. Okay, so the purpose is you must know how to approach for the examination. And there will always be some question that you would not be able to answer, which will require on-spot improvisation. There's one question which I could never predict. This was this Command Area Development Program and its impact on regional inequalities. Though in Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana, we have done this briefly. But because this scheme has been subsumed under Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana, I thought that it will not be asked by the examiner. Plus, there are certain questions, जैसे information and communication technologies have boosted the development of certain regions of India. These are those questions for which you need case studies. Thorough reading of newspaper is required. ये book से नहीं मिलेगा आपको कोई भी. If you have made the notes from the newspapers, if you have ready examples with you. अब static question में there's this question, describe the structure and relief. Last question that we're going to discuss. Question 6C. Describe the structure and relief of Deccan Plateau. Again, describe. Deccan Plateau. So how will you start the question? 15 marks. You can start by talking about the geological history, or you can start by talking about Peninsular Plateau, which is the oldest and the most stable landmass in India. Okay, you can talk about, you can start the question by talking about the diversity in the physiographic regions of India. Okay. Then you will have to draw a map here and some schematics here. Because you have a lot of matter to write, but you don't have much of time and much of space. Deccan Plateau, subdivided into Maharashtra Plateau, Karnataka Plateau, Telangana Plateau. Okay. What is to be written in Telangana Plateau or Maharashtra Plateau? First, history, lava emissions, Deccan traps. Do you remember accordant tops? Tongue-like structures protruding from the Western Ghats. Then you can talk about the different types of the trappean beds, like intertrappean beds. You can talk about upper trap, lower trap. Okay. Karnataka Plateau में again the subdivision, Malnad Maidan. You can talk about Malnad, the areas covered by Malnad. What kind of rocks? You will mention about structure. So here I'm not talking about vegetation. I'm not talking about agriculture. So rock structure. The important peaks here, Baba Budan Hills. And what kind of country is this Maidan? Rolling country. That is undulating plain. Dharwadian sedimentary rocks. Ancient granite and gneissic rocks. In Telangana, subdivision. Ghats and peneplains. We use terms like monadnocks here. And if I go to Hyderabad, what I find is granitic tors. large boulders, rock structure, no, Kadapa or Rajat further south. So some areas Gondwana rocks or ancient granitic and gneissic rocks. Incorrect, Agastya. ठीक है? So we'll talk about structure, we'll talk about relief here. So this, I think this is the only static question that we have in the paper from physiography. This year the departure was that we had only one question from the physiography, no question from monsoon, but yes, they have asked about this western disturbance that is, let's say, remotely related to monsoon, but no question from agriculture. I was surprised to see this. I was also expecting questions from agriculture like direct seeded rice. I had expected that this might come. So will you be able to attempt rest of the questions? Just try this. And one question, this one. So I'll give you the matter. It will be uploaded today itself. Okay? The matter will be uploaded for Panchayati Raj. Corridor wala to you people know, you have the matter with you. MNCs wala I will give you today itself. Achha, this question 8A. Examine how information and communication technology has boosted the development of certain regions of India. How information and communication technology has boosted the development of certain regions of India. What is the examiner asking you? How ICT has boosted the development of certain regions of India. Yahan par the question is not about how will it boost. The question is, give me examples where ICT was used and it has led to the development of the region. Give me examples wherein ICT was used in public delivery of services and how it has affected the lives of the people, led to the development. Getting my point? कि ऐसा हो सकता है, वैसा, उससे कुछ नंबर नहीं मिलेगा आपको. The question is how it has boosted. ठीक है? जैसे ENAM का कोई एग्जाम्पल है कि how the farmers of Rajkot have been benefited by ENAM. Sir, if qualified for prelims, then will it be beneficial to join a crash course for optional? Crash course, I don't think you will need crash course, but you must join a test series. Okay? Whether here or anywhere else, I'm not advertising, but it is important for you to write the answers. Okay? अगर जनधन लिख रहे हो, then जनधन में you must have the case study with you. So इसमें I'll forward it something to you. Okay, so the time is up. One thing is still pending. Pharmaceuticals, and see, the studio is not available since the time they have stopped the physical classes. All the studios are occupied. Acha, yes, one more thing. Alok Shukla reminded. Recently, the State of Forest report. Padli, summary. Okay. No need to read the full report. You will not be able to recall during the examination. Just read the summary. Okay. Chalo, thank you very much.